Do you wish that your flat die cuts were more three-dimensional and realistic looking? In today's stylish card making techniques with Jenny, I'm going to show you how you can make simple leaf dies pop off the page and look more realistic with just a couple of really easy tips and tricks. I'll show you how I made both of these cards in today's video, and I promise you it's much easier than it looks. So let's get started. Hi guys, it's Jenny. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm featuring in today's cards this Just Leaves die set. This is a really essential die set for your stash. It's got some great leaf shapes. Super versatile. You can use them on all sorts of projects. You can apply this technique that I'm going to show you to many other dies that I'm sure you've got in your stash. But today I'm going to focus just on leaves and show you a couple of different tips and techniques for getting them to look more realistic. I do recommend using alcohol markers. I'm showing you the 3 sets from Altenew that I'm going to be using on my cards today. You can choose any colours you like, and you do not have to be a colorista. I am by no means an expert at using alcohol markers, but that's okay, and you'll see why soon. So to start off with, I'm using £80 Nina Solar White cardstock. I find this slightly thinner cardstock works really well for this technique. And I'm die cutting all of the leaves out. I'm not going to use them all in today's cards, but it always helps to have some spares. And I want to give you at the end of the video just a quick comparison of the final leaf image with a couple of those spare die cuts that we didn't colour. So to start off with, I've got a sheet of printer paper just under my die cut to protect my work surface. You could also use a glass mat, which are really good for blending on. And I'm just going to scribble colours on. I've grabbed the oranges. I'm going to use some pinks in the later card. But what you want is 2 or 3 or 4 different shades of a colour, and I'm also going to come in with some green on this image as well. And you can see I'm just scribbling it on. I haven't gone with dark at the base and light at the tip or anything like that. You absolutely could if you're into light and shadow and that, but I'm just trying to make this as easy and simple as possible and scribbling it on. I'm just scribbling it on. Now, a couple of tips. You want to start with the lightest and work through to the darkest. They don't have to be next to each other, but just work through to your darkest colour and then come back in with your lightest colour and scribble it all over the piece once more, and that will help start to blend those colours together. Now turn over your die cut. You're going to see that a lot of that colour has bled through the cardstock because these are alcohol markers and we're only using £80 cardstock. You use that colour again, that lightest colour, and just scribble it all over the back and completely cover that die cut. That's going to do a couple of things. It's going to help blend out some of that bleed through, and it's also going to bleed through to the front. And what it does is it adds a little bit of mottling, a little bit of dimension, almost shading, and just adds that texture that you kind of see more in real life. So here's another look just as I finished doing a little bit of that orange colouring, just so you can see how that's progressing. It's already starting to look a little bit more like a fall leaf. Now I want to add a little bit more depth, so I'm going to come in with this green and I'm just going to try and colour in some of those stems. I'm just adding a few swipes of colour here and there, maybe a bit of green in some places that you wouldn't expect it, maybe a bit of that leaf hasn't quite yet started to turn warm orange. Maybe it's really early in autumn. And then I'm going to flip it over and do exactly the same, just blend in some of that green on the stems. I'm not being particularly careful, and I will come back in with that lighter colour just to blend it out and just make sure that any of those harsh edges are just blended up into the leaves themselves. And that finishes my colouring. It was that simple, and it's already looking kind of pretty realistic. Now to get that 3-dimensional look, you need a pokey tool or a stylus. I'm going to use my sharp tweezers from Altenew, and I'm going to draw almost like a score line or a vein down the middle of each of my leaves. So I'm just sort of gently holding one end and dragging those tweezers along. I'm pushing in quite hard, but not too hard. So I don't want to bend my tweezers, but I do want to get somewhat of a score line along each of those leaves. And I accidentally did pull one off, but we can fix that later, I'll show you. And then we're going to fold up the leaves and we're going to fold them back on themselves. We're maybe going to pinch some of the edges just with our fingertips, maybe do a bit of a wave, but you'll see that they'll fold in where you've done that score line with your tweezers. And I'm just going to do that on every single leaf on this branch. I'm being pretty gentle. I haven't even let my cardstock dry fully, so it's still a little wet from the alcohol marker ink. But as you see, as I fold up those leaves, it's already starting to take that look of almost like realistic leaves. It's really fun. You can use your tweezers if any of the pieces are a little bit too fiddly. And I've off camera finished off all of those leaves, and look at that. Isn't it cool? It just looks so different to that initial flat white die cut, don't you think? And you could leave it like that, but of course I have to go the extra. I have to do the extra. So I'm just going to grab some dark ink. I've got some Espresso Crisp Dye Ink here and a blending tool. And I'm just going to add a little tiny dab onto a few of the leaves here and there. I'm not going religiously round every single leaf. I'm just adding some dots here and there, almost like maybe that leaf dried out after it fell off the tree. And I'm going to do it with that leaf that snapped off too, because I am going to use it. And now I'm going to add some antique gold splatters because I love my splatters. You don't have to add splatters. Once they dry, it's really subtle. But I just like to add that little bit of sparkle because this is a card after all. For my base, I'm using the Mix and Match Frames dies. This sort of torn edge frame is probably my favourite frame die that Altenew carries. I love it. I've used it on quite a lot of cards and it's just a really nice subtle panel background base for clean and simple cards. Both of my cards today will be clean and simple. I'm going to add foam tape to the back just to pop those panels up onto my white note card, which I've created from £110 Nina Solar White cardstock. I'm going to mount that die cut panel into the centre. And you could layer up your leaf on top of other die cuts. For my cards today, I'm not going to be doing that because I really wanted to focus on the technique. But I did want to add a little pop of something behind this leafy branch, so I decided to use some of Altenew's metallic thread. This is the gold. I've pulled off quite a lot off the spool. I'm going to make a messy nest, but it's going to be a big one that's going to cover that whole panel. And then I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back of my leaf, lay it down over the thread, and it will pick it up. I do want to pop a little bit more dimension on this card, so once that glue has had a chance to grab onto the thread, but not before it's fully dried, I'm going to pick it up with my tweezers, flip it over, and then add some really thin strips of foam tape here and there behind those leaves. Those leaves are pretty thin, so I want to make sure that none of that is peeping out, and I can just lay it down over my panel and then stick it down. And it will hold really well. Now to add that leaf that I accidentally pulled off, I'm adding another bit of foam tape. I'm just going to pop it in and you cannot even tell that I accidentally ripped that thing off. I promise, you cannot tell. For my sentiment, I'm using this Simple Greetings die set. These are layered dies. I'm using the hugs. They're little small sentiments, so they're perfect just to pop into the middle. I've die cut the base layer die cut from vellum, and then over the top for the second layer I'm using gold mirror cardstock, and I'm just going to pop those together with some liquid glue and then mount into the center of my card using some more foam strips carefully hidden behind the letters. And I'm going to finish with some satin white sequins here and there just to keep it simple. And that finished my first card. Isn't that cool? I'm going to show you don't have to use realistic looking colours. I'm using the Sunshine Valley garden set here and the Water Garden set. I'm going to use the purples and the pinks, and we're going to use 3 more of those die cuts that you saw me cut out at the beginning. I'm going to do the exact same technique again. I'm just scribbling dark pinks, light pinks all over here. The trick again, go from light to dark. and then start filling in those gaps with that lighter colour. My lighter colour on this one is actually going to be purple. It's a really light purple, and I'm just going to blend out all of that pink with the purple, going over the top of it as well, and it just blends it out, and then flip it over, colour it in again with that lighter colour. It bleeds through both sides and really adds nice mottling. And if there's any areas where you're not happy, it didn't blend out enough, or there's a harsh line, you can always go back in with another colour and blend it out a little bit if you want to. But you don't have to, because when we add those veins in, and then when we add the splatters in, it really covers up pretty much any sort of harsh lines that you might have. On these leaves, I am going to add some of those diagonal veins as well. You can see I'm adding them onto this leaf here. And they help you get a little bit more movement when you fold up your leaves. So on that first one, we could pinch the ends and we could fold in half. On these ones, we can pinch the ends, we can fold in half, and we can also, if you grab both ends of the leaves, sort of almost wave it as well. I'm using the espresso ink once again, just to add a little bit of depth on a couple of the edges here and there. And I'll show you a quick close-up of folding these leaves again. So remember, these have got veins all the way up. Apologies, it went a little bit out of focus here. And I'm just pinching it together and pushing it together. On a couple of the leaves as well that I do off camera, I almost like scrumple the leaf. So it's almost like a paper bag almost. You're just looking to get some movement, some dimension, just sort of where those score lines are. And I didn't go all the way through the cardstock with the score lines, so you're not going to tear it unless you're really, really, really trying, or you're right at that stem like I was with that first leaf. So the leaves themselves you can sort of move around quite easily. I'm going to add some more splatters. This time I'm using the soft Lilac Metallic Shimmer Spray. I'm just splattering it over all three of my leaf die cuts. And I actually do decide that I want more splatters on my actual card. You'll see in a minute. I'm using that same die from the Mix and Match Frames set for my base panel, and then I'm going to add thin strips of foam tape to a few of the backs of the leaves and place them in a row. I did mess around, I wasn't sure where I was going to put these or how I was going to lay them out. In the end, I went for a really clean and simple sort of laid out stacked look, but you can do all sorts with these. You can make a wreath, you could bunch them together and tie a bow like a bouquet. There's lots of possibilities with these leaves, and remember, I only used 4 of them. There's 7 in the set, so you could do all sorts. For my sentiment, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to stamp directly onto the panel. This is the Hello and Hugs stamp set. I'm just going to use one of those sub-sentiments from the set and stamp it in obsidian black ink, and then I'm coming back in with those splatters. I just needed more splatters. I thought, it was looking a little bit plain, so I just came back in with that soft lilac shimmer ink spray. And here's that comparison I promised you at the beginning of the video. On the right, we've got that flat white die cut, and on the left, we've got our dimensional, realistic looking veined leaves. Don't they just pop off the card? Isn't that fantastic? I hope I've inspired you and that you do give this technique a try. I promise it is a lot easier than the final project makes it look. If you do, be sure to tag me on social media. I can't wait to see what you come up with. I do hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
Hello crafters, Jen here. For more tips, techniques, tutorials, and to discover which paper crafting products are right for you, subscribe to Altenew's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Thanks for watching.